So the yield is 73% for H2O2. So you're going to use about 1.45 tons or so to make 1 ton of hydrazine. And we go to peroxide Hydrazine process, around 1.6 tons a year in this case. And then you lose a little bit. 7% of the hydrazine is decomposed. Right, so, but roughly your yield is somewhere around 70%. And that can be improved. If you go through the patent literature, you'll find the yields maybe 80%, but generally that's what you can assume. And so your H2O2 costs, if we can skip through here, it's around the cost of production for H2O2. It's around 150 per ton for production. That was in 2004 from a quote that source that I found. But realistically, you can add it up right here by just going through the raw material consumption. So it turns out actually a significant portion of the cost is actually the palladium catalyst that needs to be regenerated, and it's actually consumed at a small rate. It's eroded, and it does deactivate over time. Catalysts, of course, deactivate, but they don't last very long, about 4 years maybe. But the point is, if you're going to make it from hydrogen peroxide, and I apologize, I cannot find my document where I went through the price, it was around 1,000 per ton. And there's actually a guy on the net that you can find his blog. He says 1,100. But if you look at this right here, your NH3 yield. Let's go back to our NH3 yield. Let's see, what was our NH3 yield? Our NH3 yield's 83, right? So 2.4 moles. So you're going to use this 1 mole of NH3 is what? 17. Let's see, what's the molar mass? So 17, yeah. And N2H4, I think it's pretty high. It's 30. 32, yeah. So 32. 2.4 times 17. 40 divided by 32. So you're going to use like 1.3 tons of ammonia. Say it's $300 a ton. So your ammonia is 382. But again, with the dual fluid reactor, you can make your ammonia for like almost free, because again, you're electrolyzing hydrogen, you're actually producing hydrogen not from electrolysis, you're producing from high temperature thermal decomposition, but it's actually high temperature electrolysis. It's not high temperature decomposition. So that's a whole other topic. The acetone, the methyl ether ketone, is not consumed, so that's obviously no yield. It's scraped off the top. It's a hydrocarbon, so it floats on top of the hydrazine hydrate. And I think they produce actually 80% is the max you can get concentration. 80% is 52% by mass. That's a little confusing. So 80% is actually 50%, I think. 100% is, I think it's 70. Because I know the F16 APU uses H70 solution, so it's 70% hydrazine and water. But usually it's quoted as 64% by mass. That's when you get your H2 weight percentage. Was it 12.58%? That's going to be quoted as 64%. But so if you add this up, how much H2O2 do we need? Well, what's H2O2 molar mass? 34. All right. So 1.37 times 34 divided by, and 37 for N2H4 was 32. So 1.45 tons, it's pretty close to that number right there that we found there back here. It's a lot of junk on my computer, but I went too far. Did I go too far? I went too far. 1.6, we're at 1.45. Okay, so 1.45, and again, the production cost for H2O2, the actual production cost somewhere around $200 a ton, $250 a ton. 362, say another 150. But again, 250 is very conservative for the H2O2. It's more expensive than that. It's realistically going to be at least 300. So times 1.45. Okay, 1.45. 300 is a more realistic price. 435 already, then another 100 for the ammonia. We're already more expensive than if we make it from. And here's a business plan here, right? Okay, so your capex 1.2 million, and it's for hydrazine production of 1.9 tons per hour. This is from the Olin Raschig price. Again, I think that's a better bet because the H2O2 route is a simpler route and you don't produce waste product. That's actually the main advantage, is that if you don't have a chloralkyl electrolysis plant, you're going to be producing all this sodium chloride that you have to re-electrolyze, and so that's a disadvantage. But the point is, I'm much more optimistic on using the old Olin Raschig process than the H2O2 process. And actually, to this day, most hydrazine is still produced from the Raschig process. It's not a modified Raschig process. Actually, they use in China, most of the hydrazine is produced from urea rather than ammonia. So the base feedstock is urea, but again, you still need to react that with sodium hydroxide. So modified Raschig is still used, and if we go back to urea-based, so you can see here, right? You're using 3,500. So here they're using actually 3.85 tons per ton, but that's actually what I'm at. So I just went off their estimate, but I've gotten numbers that are higher, 6 tons. So from some patent documents in China, it's quite high. It's about 6 tons, but there's a lot of variables, and the plant cost is pretty low. So the plant is a relatively simple plant as far as the capital expenditures of the plant. It's low, but as you can see, H2O2 is expensive, and that has a lot to do with the catalyst, the noble catalyst usage, because again, all of the H2O2 is produced through the anthraquinone process, I should say, and it's expensive. And so if you can get away from that, and because again, you're using this palladium catalyst, it's about 2% palladium, right? So fluidized bed reactor. So yeah, then the last thing you want to decide, this is not really related to production of hydrazine, but if you're going to use hydrazine as a fuel, you have to decide whether you're going to use it in a DHFC or you're going to decompose it, because you can decompose N2H4 decomposition reactor filled with 1 gram of the prepared cobalt B. I'm not sure what that stands for. Neodymium, I know is N. Nanowires might supply more than 2.84 liters of hydrogen in 1 minute. So it could produce enough H2 for 460 watt PMFC and 100% H2 use with N2H4 as a fuel. But there's all sorts of, so yeah, so this is the peroxide process. So it's N2 plus 3H2 plus 2NH3 plus 0.4, because I'm basing it off 1 mole of N2H4. This is not technically accurate, but I just kind of cheated. Plus 1.4 H2O2 equal 1 N2H4. So you don't need that much NH3. Or actually, no, yeah, you need 2.4 NH3. So I should just put 2.4. So, and then decomposition is N2H4 to N2 plus 2H2 minus 95.4 kilojoules. So it is endothermic. It's not exothermic. Excuse me, it's exothermic. Release of heat. It is not requiring an input of energy. Once you decompose ammonia, you're going to, but it depends. Decomposing hydrazine requires the right catalyst, and you're going to get incomplete decomposition to ammonia. You definitely do not want that because it'll poison your PEM. But I would not bother using a PEM cell because you're using the platinum catalyst, and it's more expensive to produce than a DHFC. So if you're going to use hydrazine as a fuel, you're definitely better off using it directly into DHFC. So as far as what uses, I mean, it's very dangerous stuff, right? So you're probably not going to use it for cars or anything like that, but for electric vehicles, they're not Teslas. A tank is a good example because a battle tank has all this thermal and acoustic signature that you could eliminate with a fuel cell. So if you're going to power something with a fuel cell, the problem is always this problem, right? It's these tanks. They take up a lot of room and they're high pressure, so you got to have an elaborate fueling system and necessary infrastructure. Whereas hydrazine is, plastic barrels that you can put on a pallet and load it up anywhere in the world. So it's a lot easier to handle from an infrastructure standpoint than high pressure H2. It's like 10,000 psi again, so rather unattractive. And so if you are going to use hydrazine to power anything, again, assuming you're going to use it for something other than rocket fuel, which as far as propulsion, hydrazine is primarily used as a rocket fuel. Actually, primarily used as a missile fuel for intercontinental ballistic missiles used as a hypergolic propellant with N2O4. I, at this point, am not spending a lot of time on hydrazine, primarily because I've switched my attention to borine fuels. Pentaborane B5H9, we're going to have actually a video on that some other time. So, hydrazine, I just got really interested in it, studied a lot about it, and so I was just going to sort of share this information, what I've learned. But if you're going to produce hydrazine, it's going to remain expensive regardless of the production method unless you get a way to produce very low-cost electricity, and then you can use the Raschig process. It's a very old process. It was the first commercial process that was used to synthesize hydrazine in great quantities until the discovery of the peroxide process around the 1970s with this company in France. It's called the PCUK process. So, but yeah, that's about it. A lot of interesting chemistry behind it. But again, I think that in the end, the Raschig process using the dual fluid reactors would be the best route to produce affordable hydrazine. So yeah.